Hi guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to your next Blender tutorial for this week. This one, I promise you, as you can see my recent files, I've been working on Fracture. So we're going to do this in 10 minutes, right? Are you ready for this? Damn, I don't have a timer. Okay, I'm going to try and use a timer. So I'm going to teach you Fracture in more or less 10 minutes. Yes, that's it. Okay, let's get cracking. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare my scene. And I think it makes a lot of sense that we are going to fracture a glass. Is anyone with me? Alright, I can hear you guys saying, yeah, fracture the glass, fracture the glass, fracture the glass, fracture the glass. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to create a very, very simple glass. Alright, nothing fancy schmancy, there it is. Alright, I'm just going to, for the sake, put in two edge loop cuts right over there. And then the other thing that we need to do is something for the glass. Well, I suppose we won't be interacting this week. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to teach you Fracture today, and then we are going to look at adding physics, what we've learned before, the rigid body, to this glass. The reason being is because it gets a bit more complicated when adding the physics to this, just because we're going to fracture the glass, and because the pieces are so close to each other, you've got to do some fancy footwork there. Alright, so you ready for that? I don't know if you can see my calendar reminder here. Yes, you can. It's Erin's birthday. Okay, that is tomorrow, so happy birthday, Erin. Okay, so here we go. Well, actually it's today, because I don't record this on the day that we release it. Well, I suppose it depends on when you watch it. That is a variable. Okay, so I created this simple glass here. I'm just going to give it thickness this way. If you want to select the faces and extrude it inwards or outwards, whatever, you can do that as well. I just think this way is way easier. And what I found was that a simple, not too thick, not too thin, and then I'm going to apply it, right, because the glass has something to fracture. Right, now let's get into this. The fracture simulation that I'm going to use is called self-fracture. You need to add it, it's in Blender, it comes with Blender. As you can see, I'm using 2.9.2, it's very, very recent, so just go check that out. If you have 2.9, 1.0, that's cool as well. I did that originally. I just came across some issues and I thought that maybe an update they would have fixed that, and it wasn't a Blender, or at least I think it wasn't a Blender issue. So you don't need to update if you don't want to, but it is kind of cool to do that. Right, so you're going to go into preferences, under edit here, preferences, you're going to go into add-ons. If you've never done this before, add-ons, you're going to search for self-fracture. You can see I've already added it. You add that in there, and then what you will find is that it will be under Object, Quick Effects, Self-Fracture. You might want to just right click on that and say add to Quick Favorites. I've already added it, that's why mine says remove from Quick Favorites. Yours over here will say add to Quick Favorites. That way when I click Q, there it is, along with my rigid body, which we learned in the previous tutorials. So self-fracture, rigid body. So okay, here we go. Now I select my object. I think just to be safe, do Control A. This resets all of these guys' numbers over here, there. I think it's dimensions. Anyway, it looks like you know what? Just to be safe, Control A. You're resetting all the transformations, which means that you sometimes, if I had to take okay, look, I don't have time for this because I've only got a couple of minutes left, but just do it. If you don't know what it is, go look it up. Okay, so I'm going to apply the self-fracture, and you get this menu over here. So I'm going to run quickly through what each object does. Oh, and another cool tool that I'm going to teach you today is this one. It's called the Annotation Tool, right? It's a really awesome tool. I had to do a quick crash course 3-minute video on it. So I did that, and we're going to use that for fracturing. That's why you need it, but also it comes handy in other workflow and directive and all of that sort of stuff. So first of all, your point source, which is, okay, so what is fracture? First of all, fracture is when you basically yeah, you fracture your object. You don't need to be a scientist to understand that, which means that what I'm doing is that I'm putting cracks and stuff all over my object. Okay, I haven't saved this yet. Let me save it. It's probably a good idea for you to do it as well. There's my fracture sim. So I'm just going to call this fracture tutorial. I just want to see if in my previous tutorial there it is. Okay, so that's what I got right. You can see I've fractured it. It looks random, and by the way, I on purposely wanted it like this over here because what I want to do is have another object fly into my glass. You can see how less cracks there are at the back and how on purposely I got these fractures, and it's so easy. I thought it was going to be very difficult. All right, what have I done? That's what I've done. See, they're actually pieces, right? So you can imagine if I add rigid body to it, I'm then going to be able to do some really cool, neat stuff with it. All right, so that's fracture. So I'm going to show you how to get that right. So, okay, in this menu now, you've got point source, recursive shatter, mesh data, physics, object, scene, debug. All right, we're going to focus, I think. So first of all, point focus. This is where basically the fractures come from the own vertices, from child vertices, own particles, child particles, annotation pencil. That's the option we're going to use. So own vertices, basically what it does is, if you look at my object, all right, you can see exactly where I've got my vertices. And so if I fracture from own vertices, and what's cool about this, you can even see the fracture process in progress. Fracture process in progress. Cool. All right. You just give a bit of time. Obviously, I am screen recording on here as well. So it does happen that slow. It's not too bad when it starts getting intense, but I think because I'm screen recording, it's taking a little bit longer. And boom, there you go. So the first thing to be aware of, my original, it creates new objects when it fractures. You can see in my scene collection here, it's created a whole lot of different objects, including my original object here. So if I just poke that out, you can see it's fractured it according to where my vertices were. All right, you can see that, right? Now the cool thing about it creating new objects like this and keeping your original object is, after it's done fracturing, it basically keeps each object selected. So if I look at it, I'll go, nah, I don't like it. I can just press X straight away, delete, and I've gone back to my original object, right? So that is own vertices. Child vertices, now this one's pretty cool. Let me just show you quickly. So I can take EG, and the best example that I can use is a UV sphere, right? You can see how different it is. Let me grab it, let me put it in the center here. I can then parent my sphere. Hold up. Right, I need to make sure. So I've got both objects selected. I can see by the one that is the lightest selected, that is the parent object. All right. Object. Come on, P. Yes, parent to object, right? Which means that now what I do is, because this ball is basically the child of the cylinder. Q, self fracture, child vertices. You can see how it's fracturing it, how it's creating the fractures according to the child object. Okay, pretty cool. And by the way, it matters where the child object is. So if I had to move this guy a bit more to this side, you'll get a different effect. All right, pretty cool, pretty awesome. I must say, pretty neat. I've never really worked with self fracture in Maya, although I might have. But you know, I, to be honest, I can't remember. So you can see, you get a whole different effect. All right, again, I can just delete all my objects. There you go, and I'm back with my original object. Right. let's delete that guy over there. Okay, and then what is the next one? Right, so now that I've shown you that, I think we can move quite quickly. So particles, if you have a particle system attached to your object, it's going to do it according to your particle, according to those particles. Child particles exactly the same. If there's a child object parented to your main object and that has particles, boom, same thing. Annotation pencil. So this is what I want to show you quickly. We're going to come back to annotation pencil, but that's what allows you to basically set up a more customization version, like to customize where your cracks are. All right, so source limit is how many. So watch this. If I put the mouse over here, limit the number of input points. So in other words, the amount of objects, cracked objects, yes, that you have, you can limit that. So if you don't want as many, you can bring that down. Noise, this is randomization in the crack. So remember in the first one when I selected own vertices, the cracks were very stiff, very strong, and very sort of angular because of the way that my edges were set. You can create a bit of a noise in that, so it randomizes a bit more. Pretty cool. Scale, self-explanatory. Then you get this one, recursive shatter. So let's do this. Own vertices, I'm going to bring it down to 5. So now we'll demonstrate the source limit, because I don't want it taking long every time that I need to demonstrate something. So recursive basically adds in small little cracks in between. All right, so let's say I say 8. Okay, it's the same explanatory as the source limit. Source limit is how many of the cracks it's going to do. Clamp, now I don't get the difference between the two because this one basically is source limit, so how many of those smaller cracks it's going to do, and basically each cracked object, it'll do 8 of them, I think, and that's how many it'll do, and then that is the limited amount. If you put them to 0, it makes it unlimited, but you don't want to do that. Again, random, self-explanatory, is the same as the noise. This does it a bit more randomly. All right, and then smaller pieces, bigger pieces, close to the cursor. So where this 3D cursor is over there. Now remember, you can change where your 3D cursor is. All right, I clicked N, brings up this menu over here. I go to view. Here I can control the location of my 3D cursor along your Y and your X axis. So holding down shift, because it moves very quickly, you can see I can move it in my Y, and I can move my 3D cursor around. If you want to take it back, see there, gone. That's it, because I let go of shift before I undid. So anyway, if I lose my cursor like I just did, all right, shift S and just say cursor to world origin, boom, there it is back again. So with that object, what I can say is put more of these the smaller shatters closer to the cursor. All right, and it does, and then this one is inverse, more far away from the cursor. So you see, you can really customize it a bit more. Right, mesh data. So smooth interior, what it does is the inner cracks, the edges can make it smooth if I select that, or by default sharp edges, which makes sense because if you shatter something, the edges are hard. But for some reason you want smoother ones, no problem, there it is. Because remember, with there's ways to maybe simulate the shape of an object. Then apply split edge, self-explanatory. There are split edges. I don't actually know too much about this. Let me put my mouse over it. Split sharp hard edges. Well, there you go. It splits the edge. Right. Match data, matches original mesh materials and data layers. If you don't know what it does, just right click. There is a way to get help on that, otherwise just Google it. Split islands, the tutorial that I was watching, these two, the guy didn't really know too much about that. Now what margin does, from what I understand, is that it puts a bit of a gap between the fractures. Okay, so if you want a little bit of a gap, they're not hard on each other, boom, there you go. And there you go, gives more stable for physics. So next tutorial. All right, physics, mesh mode, right, volume, uniform. These ones I didn't really pay too much attention to. Now what this does, recenter, is that each piece that it fractures, the pieces that you get out of each fractured object, what it's going to do is it's going to put the pivot point straight in the middle of each one of those fractured. I don't know if you remember, but after fracturing it, each piece had little dots. Now those are like the pivot points around it. Now that's very important for physics, because if you remember in my last tutorial, I spoke about the point there, about the fact that when you add a rigid body onto that, your pivot point, your center point of that piece or that object that you've added the rigid body onto, the program, see there, each piece, let me just get rid of my original object, it uses that center point for like gravitational pull, sort of self-weight stuff. And so if it's off center, it's going to start doing very funny stuff. So all right, that object recenters, but like I said, maybe for some reason, it's the great thing about this program is that, it's very loose, quite customizable, but very easy. All right, see, and that's if you want to add your fractured pieces to a collection. All right, so that it keeps it together over here in your collection. So let's say fractured glass, boom, there you go. All right, debug, these are just a few things that you can try out that developers have given you to, just check them out. All right, so what we're going to do is quickly the annotation pencil. So this is a brilliant piece of tool. It allows me to draw on here, see there, and it puts it from whatever angle you did it. All right. Then if I've drawn, I can obviously undo it. Let's say I'm trying to show someone, a person that's, maybe I'm checking work and I'm saying, hey dude, I need the glass to be over here thinner, 0.1 millimeters, and I need the bottom part over here to be thicker at 0.2. So examples like that, or hey, I need this to spin this way and not that way, right? Then I can leave notes for whatever reason. All right, if you then hold and click on the tool here, keeping it clicked in, I can go to the eraser and I can erase it. And also if you press N, you get some extra cool, just some cool tools there, just minor stuff like the size of the tool, what it affects, etc. And one of the you can even create layers. I'm going to show you now. All right, so in other words, I can have different layers. I can show and I can also hide them. This is the only part. Oh yes, and of course, let's say you don't want to erase it, but you just want to hide it, right? So let me show you something quickly here. I'm going to go back to annotation. Keep note of that. So you can change the color. Here's my notes, my different layers. So if I can have different layers, so notes for Patrick, notes for Marcus, notes for, and so very cool. Then you get this placement over here. So the one we're going to use, so again, color, what note, placement, which we're going to get into now, stabilization, stroke, you get all sorts of stuff here. Pretty cool. All right, so the one that we're going to use, I'm going to go into surface, and what this does is this draws on the actual surface. It doesn't matter what angle I do it from. If I do this and I do this and I do this, it's drawing on the actual surface. You can see that leaked through, that's why it's done something weird there, but it's actually drawn on the surface of my object. All right, can you see? Pretty cool. So let's say I want to hide that. Simply just come in over here, and there you go, annotations. You can show and hide them if you don't want to delete them. All right, I do want to find the shortcut. I haven't attempted to find the shortcut, so it's not that I couldn't find the shortcut. It's just that I've been so busy, breaking and fracturing my meshes that, yeah. Okay, so let's get down to fracturing. Right, so let's say this glass. Now, my idea is that I want something to swing and hit the glass. So let's say from this angle. All right, that means I want the cracks to sort of break out this way like this. Okay, smaller pieces on the inside, and obviously the pieces can get bigger as they go out. Great stuff. So there you go. All right, let's go back to my box selection tool, and my quick menu, having my object selected, Q. Now let's save quickly so that I can easily come back and forth. There were times where my project did crash, all right? And the other thing that I want to say is that when you fracture and you find bits and pieces missing, delete your original object and remodel it. I came across that. I didn't find anybody else having issues, but when I deleted it and I just redid it, boom. So I hope you don't have a big model that's got big problems. Try and re-import it again or whatever. Okay, self-fracture. So what I did, so I selected annotation. By the way, you can shift select these because you can have a combination. So annotation, my source limit, I kept it at 100. I was just like, dude, whatever, go wild, I'm good. Okay, randomization. Now remember, I've got a actual set. I want something very specific here. Now I don't want exactly stiff lines like that, so I do want some randomization. Try it without the noise, see what it does, because it doesn't do it strictly like that. But I just like to, if I put too much noise, then it's going to break that pattern, that specific pattern that I want there. So I'm going to go 0.25. All right, you can go 0, you can go 1. Never gone over 1. Don't think you can. Okay, recursive, I'm leaving this off, but if you want to, you can maybe put that on 3. We're going to see now what it does, and I want it on the bigger pieces. Okay, you know what? I'm going to put on 3. I think 3 is going to be awesome. I'm not going to touch any of these other guys over here. And here we go. And now you watch your simulation. Now it's this simple. All right. And by the way, I can create operational presets as well. Okay. And I can let it do its work. So you can actually see how it's forming. Now it looks like I might get some holes in this one. Okay. All right. So it's created the fraction. Damn, I forgot to do the collection. But yeah, maybe next time. Now what it's doing is those smaller recursive shatters. You can see how it's going through each object. It's actually doing it. Alright, so I've showed you today basically how to fracture it. Okay, I think we've been about 20 minutes. I think. And next week we're going to look at applying the rigid body to this, and then we're going to have some fun. Okay, if you want to go ahead and apply the rigid body to that, I tried it. My object was doing some weird stuff. That's because of how close they are together. The other thing is that I came across, now do you remember that other guy from last week? I mentioned his YouTube. I'm sorry, I cannot remember. He's something 8D. What he did was that in a scenario where you want to have the glass fall off something and shatter on the ground, or something to come and swing in your render, you'll actually see the actual cracks, which you don't want. So what they do is that they'll hide the original object, and then at the point of impact they will show the original object. All right, so there's my marvelous creation. I'm just going to recenter, view, frame selected. Okay, it's not doing it because that's hidden, but no worries, no stress. All right, there you go. Now you can play around. All right, this wasn't exactly what I was expecting, because remember I wanted it more in more of a shatter in a specific spot, which you saw I got right in my other ones, in my previous my other tutorial. I think it's those recursive shatters that's messing with me. Might need to just bring that down a bit. See, it just randomizes it a little bit, but you can see where there's the smallish the recursive shatters. You can see how it's random. It's pretty cool, and you can see how it's completely loose, my friends. Look at that. Very nice, and it's kept the hard edges. All right, there it is. Pretty nice. All right, so that is fracturing, self-fracture in Blender 2.9. or 2.91 or 2.9.2. Alright, so next week we'll be adding a nice rigid body onto this guy. Try and pick something completely different to what I've done, and then what you might want to do is actually go look up images of what that object looks like shattered, and then try and sit with the settings. You know what, it's good to play around. Try and keep them low so that while you're playing around, you know, you're not waiting for hours. I'm sure for those who have a really good GPU, they'll probably find that the simulation might go quicker. I'm not sure if the simulations fall on the GPU. Some guy watching my tutorial right now is probably going, duh, you idiot, or duh, no, that's the problem, or something. But anyway, sit and play around and try and get it right. And guys, like, comment and say, hey, this is what I did, check what I got, and yeah, put an image there, or put a link to an image, or do your own damn old tutorial, and yeah, share and show what you've done. All right, because someone else might learn from what you've done, or someone else was trying to get what you were doing. So yeah, there it is. There's my fractured glass. I'm hitting save because that is it. So guys, until next week, I will check you. Have lots of fun with the fracturing. Check out my other tutorials where there's tons of other stuff that I've done with simulations. We've done wind, we've done cloth simulations, we've done soft body, rigid body last week, and now we're doing fraction simulations. All right, so until next week, check you guys, stay safe, don't stay at home. See you then. Cheers.